Did you guys see my email with topics for introduction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Ethan Goldsmith, and I think we'll wait 1 or 2 more minutes and then start this webinar. There's a Q&A box on the left, so it should be on the left of your screen. If you submit questions that way, when we get to the Q&A session, we'll be able to see them. Okay, so thanks to everyone who's joined this webinar. My name is Ethan Goldsmith. I was in the Excel class of 2011, and we can't see the participants, but we can see any questions that you ask if you click on the Q&A tab on the left of your screen. So please feel free to jump in with text questions at any point, and I'll direct them either to the group or to individuals if you specifically request that someone answer that question. So to get going, I think that we're gonna go around the group here and introduce ourselves and tell us a little bit about our background in consulting, and then we'll ask a few more prepared questions and then open it up to general questions that any of you have. So I'll go ahead first. My name, again, is Ethan. I work for a company called Roland Berger. It's a mid-sized strategy consulting company based out of Europe with a pretty small practice in the U.S. There's about 60 of us working in the U.S. So I joined the company for two reasons. I was interested in strategy consulting based on my internship in Israel, actually, where I worked in an internal strategy group for a company, and then kind of wanted to apply that in a consulting setting. And also because I had an internship in consulting my previous year that really introduced me to the concept, but I wanted to be at a small firm, which is why, again, I joined a company that has about 60 consultants in the U.S. I went to school at the University of Michigan, and I recruited for my current position out of senior year. So I went through both the internship recruiting process the previous year for my summer internship in consulting, and then again the full-time recruiting process for my current job. So I'd like to hand it over to Andrew, if you don't mind giving us an introduction.
Sure. I'll go ahead. Hi, my name is Andrew Giles. I'm a member of the Excel class of 2014. I actually am a senior still in college. I go to Washington University in St. Louis, and this past summer I interned with Deloitte Consulting in their strategy and operations practice out of Chicago. Had a fantastic experience, and will be going back full-time with the firm out of the New York office. I decided to go back to Deloitte for a number of reasons. First of all, had a fantastic experience this summer. Really enjoyed the kind of work that I was doing, and really enjoyed the people that I worked with. I think particularly, at least my experience with Deloitte, and I think is similar to a lot of consulting firms, is consulting is really an industry where people in there are dedicated to your development, especially in your first few years out of college. They have a vested interest in seeing you grow and develop as a young professional. I mentioned again that I go to Washington University, currently a senior studying business here, and I think my first foray into consulting actually was my Excel summer in Israel. I worked for a boutique strategy consulting firm, Sheldor, and I really enjoyed the strategic work that they were doing, but wanted to get a bit more of an experience in a larger firm. So I actually went a little bit of the opposite of Ethan. So that's me.
Great. Jay, do you want to give us a little bit about your background?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Jay Canrick, Excel class of 2015. I am currently in my third week at Parthenon EY in New York. And I joined for a number of reasons, but largely for me, I just felt like the cultural fit. I got along really well with people that I interviewed with, and I was concerned, given past experiences, I was concerned about working with people that I got along well with. So for me, that was important. I just graduated from Duke in May, actually, so I'm fresh off the boat from Excel and from college. And as far as recruiting goes, I interviewed for consulting jobs as a junior, worked at a company called GLG, and then after that summer I went through the full-time process and ended up at Parthenon. So happy to answer any questions about that.
Thanks, Jay. Blake?
Yep. Hey, everyone. My name is Blake Dickstein. I was in the Excel class of 2012, and I currently work for EY in their advisory consultant program, and I've been here for a little over a year. I went to University of Florida, where it's not too heavily of a consulting recruiting school, but it's a very heavy accounting and audit tax school, so EY had a pretty big presence there. So I kind of leveraged the relationships that I made with the recruiters from EY on campus to then shift me over to another school's recruiting to kind of pretend that I was going through their undergrad recruiting process, and then it followed the same line of kind of the on-campus behavioral interview and then moving on to the other interviews. So a little different, but still kind of the general idea of finding people on campus and then moving along with them that way. And I joined EY, similar to what Jay said. I really like the people that I met, and then the advisory consultant program that they have is a 2-year, not exactly a rotational program, but the idea is that you don't affiliate strongly to any sector or industry for the first couple of years, so that you can experience a lot of different things, which really appealed to me.
Great, thanks, Blake. And finally, Becky.
Hi, everyone. I'm Becky. I was in the Excel class of 2011 with Ethan. I graduated, I'm with Deloitte Consulting in the Strategy and Operations group, specifically aligned to life sciences and healthcare. So I did my undergrad and my grad program at Cornell. My grad program was in health administration, which was one of the big reasons why I decided to come to Deloitte. So summer before my senior year, I interned with ZS Associates in Princeton and really enjoyed it, really enjoyed the healthcare components, the data analysis, etc., but knew I wanted some wider experience within the healthcare industry, specifically a firm that had a lot of work in the provider sector. So that was my reason for joining Deloitte. I interned summer before my second year of grad school with Deloitte Consulting, and decided to come back for not only the reasons that Andrew mentioned, but also really the wide array of healthcare experience I knew that I would get.
Great. So I think we have a very nice selection of different types of companies that people work for and reasons that they join those companies. So I'm looking forward to this panel discussion. The first question that I would pose, though, is a general piece of advice that you would give to someone that is going into the recruiting process for consulting. Since I have the benefit of being the moderator, I'll go first. And my first general piece of advice would be, if you think you want to go into consulting, first of all, confirm that that's the case, and then second of all, focus 100% of your energy on that recruiting process. From my experience, the people who try to consult for or recruit for maybe both banking and consulting at the same time end up being much less successful than the people who who choose one industry to dive into. And then the second advantage of that is that second point. You get to actually dive into the industry and really understand the nuances between the different companies, because while we all have consulting experience, I think our experiences are probably quite different, and it's good to know what you're getting yourself into within consulting before you basically make your decision yeah. Okay, Andrew.
Oops, sorry, I think I was on mute there for a second. Put him on the spot first here. I think one little tidbit that I found this year, I think particularly being back at school and seeing a number of my friends go through the recruiting process now, as well as getting to interact with the firm and starting to see a little bit from the other side. I think a huge piece that goes into the consulting process for many firms is a lot of networking. And I think for a lot of people that can be overwhelming. They feel the need to get to interact with lots and lots of different people from different firms. I would say there are a couple caveats that I would give with networking. Obviously, it is something that is very important to consulting as an industry as a whole. But I think a big caution that I often tell people is don't over-network. I think there are sometimes people that feel the need to try to get to know every single alumni from a particular school, and they end up having a lot of the same conversations over and over, and forget that a lot of times people, especially alumni, are sitting on recruiting teams for schools, and they still talk. And so I would encourage people, while it's important to network as a way of getting your foot in the door and hopefully helping you get that interview, really only continue to try to network with people at the same firm if you still have more questions to be answered and you're trying to get new information. But do remember that people at firms do talk, and occasionally over-networking can sometimes get you, I hesitate to use the word blacklisted, but it will work its way around.
Great, thanks, Andrew. And I actually would jump in and add one piece of advice on that note as well about networking. I think that what you can do that can be really advantageous, and instead of trying to talk to 3 or 4 people or more from the same firm, try to develop a relationship with one individual person at that firm. And that, as Angie mentioned, that a lot of companies have recruiting teams, and when they make decisions, if you actually have a relationship with one person, then they're more likely to jump in and say, "Hey, I've actually gotten to know them, and I have good things to say about them," than if you just have superficial touch points with 5 or 6 different people. So that's a great point, Andrew. Jay?
Yeah, I guess from an organizational standpoint, recruiting can get super overwhelming, and there's a lot of moving pieces both on your end and on the other end as far as like what the companies need from you. So I think something that I was recommended and that really helped me out a lot was coming up with a spreadsheet where I actually listed out all of the places I wanted to apply, and then collected the information on what they wanted from me, whether it was a resume, cover letter, some sort of writing sample, the whole thing, and then putting that together and sorting it by the company's deadlines for the application process, which sort of helped me stay on top of where I needed to apply. And then also sort of built into that, you can then sort of figure out a way to say, okay, at this point, it's going to start making sense for me to start doing more interview prep, or I want to have all of my applications in by a certain date. It allows you to stay on top of that and really keep track of what interviews you have coming up, what things you need to get done over that week, so that you don't get too overwhelmed with it and forget about living your life and doing school also.
Great. Thanks, Jay. Blake?
Yeah, I did the same thing that Jay did, so I can echo that as well. It's just really helpful, especially when you start traveling, hopefully for like on-site interviews and things like that. Just kind of craziness. So it's good to keep track of stuff like that. The other piece of advice that I would share is just a lot of people, I think, go into the interview process and are very willing to kind of be flexible with what the company wants. So they say, oh, we're looking for someone to join here, this kind of work. And obviously, on the one hand, it's good to kind of be open to different experiences. But for me, I think what worked really well was just a level of confidence of knowing what you want and what you want to get out of going into consulting, kind of what you're looking for, and then being able to talk about that kind of with reasons, especially given that all of the experience that we all have kind of with our internships that they were in Israel. You really can't stress enough like how actual work experience you had led you into this decision to go into consulting. And I think a lot of the recruiters that I talked to and people on the other side just kind of respected someone coming in with that idea in mind, not just kind of that wishy-washy, yeah, consulting sounds fun and it sounds good, but just really kind of having that intent of what you're trying to do. And even if it's just something as specific of the kind of work that you want to do or the location that you want to be or the kind of clients that you want to work with, I think that goes a long way of differentiating you from other candidates.
Makes a lot of sense. Becky?
So I want to echo everything that everyone said so far. Also just want to touch on the case prep process because it's something that people haven't yet touched on in these answers. So case prep, I think, is a pretty significant part of this consulting recruiting process. I know for Deloitte, for the recruiting processes that I've been involved in, it's half behavioral, half case, and the case does matter. That being said, I would really encourage everyone on the call not to freak out about it too much. It really the case process follows a lot of the general problem solving and analysis things that you've learned throughout your education. My biggest tip for the case prep process is becoming familiar with a few of the different frameworks that are recommended in all of like the case prep, case in point books, things like that. And when you go into your cases, really use those just as a framework to help you structure your thinking. And I know you've probably heard a lot of this from multiple people, but make sure that you're then using your personal problem solving skills after you've structured whatever you're trying to answer. So essentially use frameworks as a guide, but don't be too bounded by them once you begin the case prep process.
Absolutely. Okay, so the next question that I'd like to pose to the group is, what is something you now know that you wish you had known when you were recruiting for consulting? And this time, why don't we go in a reverse order, and I'll throw it right back to Becky.
I think I kind of wish I knew a little more of, having been on the other side of recruiting, especially this past season, being closer to it, just knowing what the process is kind of behind the scenes. And, I think a lot of, when I was talking to Mikey about what are the benefits to Excel of an Excel alumni, of having this panel here and having the network, talk to the people in the firms that you're looking into, talk to them about the recruiting process, get their opinions, because I think we have some unique perspective from having participated from the recruiting side. So it's something I guess I wish I would have learned a little more about.
All right, Blake?
Yep, I have two things, and I try to share these with anyone that I kind of end up talking to who's either new to the firm or kind of what Becky was saying, those one-on-one conversations during the recruiting process, things that I think are not really that discussed openly from the company's perspective a lot of times. So the first being that once you join a consulting firm, at least in my experience, you're basically a free agent. So every firm does it differently, but at least the way EY does it is that there's someone who's called an engagement manager, and they're kind of responsible for staffing you on a project, but they have 200 or so new people to staff on projects, and it's not an exact science. So the networking and all of that stuff doesn't end once you get the job offer. So you come back from training, and then you're just in this pool of staff, and you want to start working, but there might not necessarily be a project lined up for you right away. For some people there might be, but others are more lucky than some. So just, I didn't know that at all going into it, that it wasn't, they explain things very neatly and nicely in the recruiting process. Then you come back from training after a great 2 weeks of like firm, Kool-Aid, and then there's nothing for you to do for maybe a week or two or more. So a lot of my friends were on the bench for 2-3 months coming in, and they were starting to go a little crazy. So just a good expectation to have coming into it that the networking and all of that stuff doesn't end. And obviously you can talk to the people in your firm about how to go about doing it strategically, but just something I just didn't know about. And then the other piece of it is the conversation about travel and just kind of what the lifestyle expectation is. So I think a lot of people, when I was meeting with the firms, they talk about, you do Monday to Thursday travel, you're home on the weekends, you work in the office on Fridays, but kind of skim over the lifestyle implications. So it's really hard being away from home sometimes. I've been traveling every week since I started for the most part, with a week or two off. I ran into Becky at LaGuardia a couple times. It's not the most fun thing in the world to always be away. It's hard to kind of maintain those relationships at home with your friends, especially moving to a new city. It's hard to find time to watch Monday Night Football sometimes because everyone at your team wants to go out to dinner and they don't watch football. So it's just kind of working with those people on the road is a very different experience than probably anything any of us were used to beforehand. So just worth talking about and worth really thinking about if that's the kind of lifestyle that you're willing to get into, because that's kind of a lot of people talk about the negative aspect of consulting is that lifestyle. So thinking about that a bit on top of it, consulting being the kind of work that you want to do and the firms that you want to get a part of. So I think it's just worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think you make some really great points there. Jay?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to disagree with Becky a little bit on this one. But I think one thing that I wish I knew was that I should look through Case in Point once and then never look at it again. I think, at least for me, it was important to just look through it to get an understanding of how the whole case process works. But after that, I became too reliant on it, which is sort of what Becky was getting at. And you try and memorize it and then work through this whole problem with this super structured, pre-formulaic answer. And it just gets really boring to an interviewer who's given the same interview 20 times in a row that day and another 20 times every day before that. So one thing I think that's important is just to use that as a very loose foundation, and then come up with your own way to actually structure it in a creative fashion, because otherwise you just get super boring, and it's not, you just don't come off as a creative thinker, which in the end of the day is what they're looking for. And the other thing I would say is that a lot of times people are too concerned with getting to an answer in the case, that they forget that it actually is really important how you structure your thoughts and your presentation of your thoughts. So I think taking time to actually focus on that structure and saying, how am I going to present the 3 options that I have, as opposed to just like running through them like some random laundry list you have, is very important.
Just to echo Jay, not to interrupt, I do very much agree with that, and that was the point I was trying to get at. And just a quick anecdote, I have one friend at the firm who got his answers like pretty much wrong, but the recruiters always joke about how he was like the most confident, incorrect person they had ever like interviewed, and he just thought about it the right way, even though his numbers were wrong. He got the job. So just a little anecdote.
Great. Andrew?
Yeah. I'm assuming we have a number of juniors on the call, so I wanted to tailor my answer a little bit more toward the internship recruiting process specifically. I think one thing to keep in mind, especially as a junior looking to go to consulting, is that for most firms, there are often a disproportionately small number of internship opportunities relative to the number of full-time offers that they give out. Now, obviously, you're all Excel alumni. You're all probably brilliant people, and I have no doubt that many of you will get the jobs this summer. But that being said, even if you don't, and you're still interested in consulting, keep pursuing it. Keep in touch with the people that you met throughout the recruiting process. Keep in touch with your interviewers, and know that the opportunity, more often than not, will still be there the following year. I know a number of friends that have gone through the full-time recruiting process this year who did not get internships in consulting last summer and have landed jobs with top consulting firms this year. And so I just encourage you to keep the door open with any firms that you're interested in, and know that the opportunity doesn't go away even if you don't get it your junior summer.
Great. I think those are all fantastic pieces of advice. I'm going to tailor mine towards the interview process, because, and then please, if anyone has additional questions about interviewing, I'm sure a lot of us can answer them, but I actually just interviewed 2 full days of interviewing on campus in the last 2 weeks, so I've done like 20 interviews in the last 2 weeks, and to me, far and away, the most important thing about interviewing is if I generally have a good conversation with that candidate and am not bored by them or don't feel like their answers are scripted, and I feel like I'm actually getting to know them during that interview process. And this is part of the case as well. Like, I think that the case, being able to structure your response and do the math correctly is really a prerequisite, and it's at the end of the day, if you don't do the math 100% right, that doesn't really bother me, but it's more about thinking through it with me and doing it together and engaging me when I'm interviewing you than if it's just a replica of what Case in Point says. So I think that all of these guys have touched on really important points. Okay, so I have one more question that I'd like to pose to the group, and then I'm going to open it up to any questions that the crowd has. This question specifically for Becky to start with, but anyone is welcome to join. And the question is just more generally, what's your experience with diversity in consulting?
So I had asked that this question be asked during the panel just because I did want to address the fact that I was the only woman speaking on this panel, and I can't see the representation of attendance right now, but do want to make sure that people know that consulting is a really diverse field. A lot of the larger firms, and I'm assuming a lot of the smaller firms as well, have a lot of diversity initiatives. So Deloitte, it's the Women's Initiative win, to just make sure that you feel supported in the firm, things like that. But even more so than that, just want to make sure that all of the female alumni on this webinar realize that there are a lot of Excel alumni women in consulting, and I think it's a great thing to go into as any young professional, not just males. So wanted to throw that out there. In terms of Deloitte's diversity initiatives, there's a ton. Pretty much every group has and can create their own diversity organization, and there are challenges with being any minority in any firm. even if it's trying to navigate how to make sure that you get off for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, things like that. The resources are available, and it goes back to the importance of networking and consulting and building relationships with people who you can ask questions of and rely on the experience of to ensure that you succeed at whatever firm you choose.
Great. Yeah, I mean, coming from a small firm, I could also touch on this, that there's, as a consulting company, we value a diverse team to the utmost degree, and we try to build the team for each project to have diversity on it, both from all types of perspectives. I mean, a huge part of my firm is our international reach, and the fact that we staff our teams pretty much always with an international colleague to some degree, but also females and things like that, and really all types of diversity. We don't have as much in terms of formal diversity initiatives simply because it's a smaller firm, but it's still highly valued and something that we actually, to the extent that we can legally do so, look to build the diversity into our recruiting process. And I also just want to touch on one other aspect of maybe the female side of consulting that I've observed, and maybe other people want to chime in, is that at the entry levels, there seems to be a very high percentage of female consultants, but once you start looking up the chain towards the project manager and partner levels, it's a much more dominated by males. I mean, the easy reason that tends to be the case is a lot of times the work-life balance aspect, and people choosing not to wanting to be on the road that much. But I think it's something that's worth noting. So I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in on this topic, but please do.
Yeah, I can add one piece of it as well. So the project that I had been on that I actually just finished since January was myself and 5 other women. So I was by far the minority male on that group, and that was at all levels of the organization. So partner, senior manager, senior, and then myself. And also were married or had mortgages and things like that. So there's kind of a lot of different angles to it, and it's really just about kind of making those relationships with the people that you're working with, regardless of what their background is or where they're coming from, or kind of what they do on the weekend. So coming out of college, a good piece of advice that I got, which is something that probably we've all faced a little bit, is to not talk about college so much, or to not talk about certain aspects of college, not necessarily in the team, but definitely kind of about with the client or things like that. So it was hard for me to kind of engage in conversation with the female partner who has been married for 30 years and has a mortgage and owns and rides horses on the weekends, just kind of not really aligned to what my life is like right now. But I think it's just, at least EY does a pretty good job of encouraging just that open, honest conversation and kind of good teaming in that way, and then obviously finding some common ground. So it definitely can go on either side, but just kind of know that, to Ethan's point, that it's consulting pretty much values diversity at all levels and any way to the extent that they can. So I think you'll find yourself, no matter what, in some kind of team dynamic or client dynamic where it's not people who are just like you.
All right. Anyone else? Otherwise, I'd propose that anyone who is listening in, please jump in with any questions that you have, either for the group or specifically for any of us.
I don't have much to add on the diversity side, but I do actually have to head out now because I have work to do, because they work as hard. But if anybody has any questions for me specifically or about Parthenon or anything for that matter, I think Mikey's going to circulate our email addresses. So if you guys want to reach out, feel free.
Great. Thanks for joining, Jeff.
Yeah. See you guys.
Okay, so right now, still waiting for any questions. I'll say that we'll keep this conversation open for another 10 minutes or so, and anyone can jump in. In the meantime, I'll go ahead and continue my questioning, and I'll start with that point that Jay brought up in terms of work-life balance and maybe what it was, how it was described to you when you were recruiting and how it actually is, and what your thoughts are on that. So my personal experience has been that I've been worked extraordinarily hard over the last 2.5 years. I travel nonstop. I sometimes forget where I am to that extent. I'm traveling so much, and well, all that while we work very late nights, pretty much every single night, and I mean it's endless, to just be completely blunt with it. Another thing that I think is a little unique about Roland Berger that isn't necessarily true of other firms is that we also work very hard when we're on the beach. So maybe not quite as hard, but we're expected to stay productive. So we engage in a lot of intellectual capital development, recruiting. A lot of the times, just because it's a smaller firm and we don't have the like HR support network that other companies have, we have to tackle some of those. So the thing that I will say though that has been great is my company really does value, at the same time as we work hard, time away. So all of my project teams that I've ever that we work with, people completely free on the weekends. So it's not, every once in a while I'll have to do a little work on a Sunday, but never like go into the office and work the whole day. And also we value vacation time a lot. And one thing that is kind of nice about consulting is that when you're in between projects, there are definitely things that you could be doing, but you don't have a high expectation load. So I'm able to get away for 2, even sometimes 3 weeks at a time, and completely detach. Okay. Does anyone else want to chime in? Maybe have a little more positive of a response on the whole work-life balance aspect?
Sure, I can chime in. So it's a bit firm specific, but first of all, just want to kind of say that my experience so far has been that a lot of it depends on the project and the people you're working with and the type of work that you're doing. So I've had a couple projects that are, I wouldn't say low burn, but really manageable. And when I was working on an M&A project before announcement, it was really high burn, a lot of long hours, late nights, etc. So a lot of it at Deloitte, at least, is about finding the people who you like working with and finding the people who have the same work-life balance goals that you have. And the tone is really set by leadership on the team. So that's something that's been really important to me, is to find the managers, senior managers, and partners who really appreciate work-life balance. We have a really large effort in the firm for flexibility and predictability, so kind of changing your travel schedules and your work schedules and things like that. So that's been my experience. I think, yes, it definitely is high burn, and there are a lot of situations where you can't get around that. But there are a lot of situations where you can have the flexibility that you need if you're having the right conversations.
Okay, great. So Becky, I'm going to interrupt this this question and jump to some of the questions that are being posed to the group. The first of which is if we see consulting being something that you plan on staying into, or if you plan on transitioning into another field. And if so, what kind of field do you see yourself transitioning into, and how do you think consulting will benefit you in that career move? Does anyone want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, I can start, maybe just because I've been giving that some thought lately. Yeah, so as I mentioned, I think for me the biggest thing is the work can be great and really rewarding, and I really like the client engagement that we have. It's just the travel to me is not sustainable, I guess I would say, for, I don't know, for a full career. 2, 3 years, whatever it may be, is fine, and we're all kind of young and not, again, tied down to the mortgages and all of those things for the most part. But I definitely don't plan on doing this kind of travel for the rest of my career, or even more than maybe another couple of years. So transitioning out, you really kind of have a really open-ended pool of things that you can do, because consulting does just touch on so many different things. So a lot of people will say, you move from consulting to industry. So instead of consulting as a Big Four or a strategy firm for a client, you work at the client essentially, full time. You're employed by that client to do business development or strategic initiatives or even just project management or things like that are really common moves. And then there's also the other side of it, which is kind of the entrepreneurship, startup space. You gain a lot of really valuable problem-solving skills and operational things in a really short amount of time, especially depending on how quick your projects are. You get exposure to a lot of different things. So I feel pretty confident that I could kind of be in a more ambiguous situation and thrive that way because of the exposure that I've had and the tight deadlines and things like that. So it's really pretty open. I know a lot of people also do the MBA path to kind of pivot into something that would be more kind of geared outside of graduate level recruiting. So I don't know if anyone else on the panel has any thoughts around MBA stuff. That's kind of still a little far out for me right now.
Cool. So I'll jump in on this one because I think that my plans are a little different than the norm. I actually really like what I'm doing and could see myself doing it for at least a little while longer. I think that for anyone our age to plan more than a few years is asking much, but I personally see myself staying in consulting at least until the next level, which is basically the post-MBA level. And my firm has a policy that they'll promote high performers into that role even without an MBA. So I want to continue to grow with the firm, and that's my personal plans. In terms of exit opportunities, though, I think that there really are an endless number of opportunities, and to some extent that can be a little scary, I think, because it's not like banking where you're going to go to banking and then you're going to go to PE and that's your career. But in consulting, it's much more open-ended, and a lot of it, I think, is very opportunity-based. So I've had clients who have unofficially behind closed doors offered me jobs, and that's a way a lot of people go, I think. And then I think the MBA route is also a very common route. But in terms of the skill set to succeed, I think I personally could not imagine a career choice out of undergrad that prepares you better, simply based on the rigorousness of the work, the exposure that you have in pretty high pressure situations with clients. And those are the things that really make you grow and mature very quickly from a personal development standpoint. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in. Becky, maybe you do because you've been there a little while. Andrew, I think it's probably a little early for you to be thinking about this, but we do have another question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm in a little bit of a different place just because I came in targeted to a specific industry within the firm, and for me it was really figuring out what I wanted to do within that industry, and consulting has helped me to confirm that I really enjoy working in hospitals, not necessarily the life sciences and insurance side. So probably what I'll pursue. I agree with Blake that the travel just does get tough at a certain point, and at this point, I'm still really happy in the firm, but not sure what will happen in a couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question. Info sessions are approaching, and I just want to ask how you recommend approaching the networking circles that occur after the presentation. What type of questions and personal disposition do you expect from the other side of the table? I'll answer this question first, because my company actually started a new policy of avoiding the crop circle altogether. We specifically say at the end of our presentation that we see the crop circle as useless, and please leave the room and contact us individually if you'd like to learn more about the firm. And I personally look down on anyone who comes up to me at that point and tries to form said crop circle, because I told you not to and you're wasting my time, and I believe that the crop circle is useless. So kind of like I was saying earlier about the best way to go about networking, I really think it's about finding someone who you can actually form a relationship with. And that's actually, I think, easier to do than you might think it is, because there are full recruiting teams assigned to your school who, and those people are happy to set up individual phone conversations, have follow-up phone conversations, respond to quick individual emails that you have, and it's really about that relationship than these superficial contact points. That might be the extreme example, but I wouldn't be surprised if other people feel similarly. Any other thoughts? Did I go too far?
I agree. I mean, my firm hasn't done anything that specific, but I mean, before you even said that, I was going to say it's so much more valuable to just get a business card or an email or whatever, however they want to give you their information, and then take it from there. There's so little that you can say surrounded by 5 other people, like nipping at the heels of this one poor recruiter, that's going to make them remember you without sending them an email anyway. So just go ahead and send that follow-up email. The one thing I will add, though, either in that conversation somehow or in the follow-up email, is to just try to pick something that they had talked about specifically, usually about their personal experience, not necessarily something you can find on the firm's website, and try to tie back your interest to what they said, right? So it just shows that you value the time and their kind of personal engagement that they spent, and you're not just sending, and even if you are, but to make it sound like you're not sending, 6 generic, it was nice to meet you, looking forward to hearing more about the opportunities at your firm emails, just to try to personalize it a little bit more.
Yeah. Another thing I would add about the networking piece is some people, I think, fall for the trap of trying to speak to the highest level person that they can. So, if a partner comes and gives a presentation, or a project manager even, and they try to make contact with that person and form a relationship with that person, first of all, that person has the least amount of time to spend talking to you, and second of all, I really think that even if you were to somehow manage to form a relationship with that person as I've been describing, it wouldn't be as beneficial as forming a relationship with a entry-level person, because it's that entry-level person who's sitting around the discussion group when people are making decisions about advancement to the second round or offers, and it's that person that's going to say, well, I really had a connection. It's not the your level, I guess. Any other input on crop circles or on networking in general? All right, so those are the questions that we had, and I think that this is probably a pretty good time to close the session. I do obviously want to open it up if there are any final thoughts that the rest of you guys have.
I think just feel free to reach out to any of us, right? If you have any other questions, especially specific to the firms that we're at. There's no better kind of insight that I had personally than talking to people who are already doing what I wanted to do. So I think I speak for all of us when I just say feel free to reach out. Agreed.
And not just while you're recruiting, but if you're entering any one of these firms. I know for Deloitte, and Andrew will have to get you involved in this, but we've had some Excel alumni emails going back and forth figuring out a New York lunch or something like that. So it's not during recruiting. Make sure it's when you join.
Yeah, absolutely. We spend a lot of time in hotel rooms between Monday and Wednesday evenings that are excellent times to get on the phone. So please do reach out. All right, so thanks to everyone for joining this conversation. I hope everyone found it useful. Feel free to reach out to any of us, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the conference in November. Bye.
Bye, everyone.